I'm Jane Campion, and today I'm having the pleasure of chatting with Greta and Noah about their amazing film Barbie. Um, I'm kind of incredibly excited to have a chance to chat to you about it because it's so good. It was just such an incredible delight to see this film and the degree of inventiveness and the surprise in it. Like, Barbie is like such a just a plastic immovable creature, a doll that I lived my life wanting collections of and I wasn't allowed. Even the sight of so much frustration and desire for me. And I really thought what a great subject, but also a brave subject because she, you know, um, she's kind of, you could say, feminist enemy. And how you played with that and turned it on its head and basically the Greta and Noah-ness of you both, how you brought your own wit and empathy and humanism into this plastic doll world and gave this sort of like incredibly witty, funny, cute portrait of it and then turned everything on its head, like so many reversals. I was actually like, my brain felt like, I don't think I can take another one. I don't know where I am anymore, but it's really actually packed with philosophy and but most importantly humor, wit, fun, invention, and it's so much got your personal flavor, which is the greatest delight, and it's a blockbuster. I can't imagine how you did this, but what I really am intrigued by is, how it began from your end, how the writing started, or what. I always love to know the process that people have. So I was hoping you might chat to me about what roles you both took and how they reversed and changed and who did what. I guess I understand you both as being, in the philosophy of the film to be basically humanist in the end and to kind of, crack out of the ultra feminine and the patriarchy to everyone being their own self, which is like, it sounds simplistic, but it really is, I guess, the job.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all those nice things. And even when you were talking about them, I thought that I think you said Barbie, that your mom didn't like Barbie, or you weren't allowed
Yeah.
to have Barbie. And I was the same way. My mom didn't like Barbie. And what you expressing, she was the site of so many desires and frustrations. I think that's how I felt. I thought she was, you know, beautiful. I thought Barbie was beautiful. I thought all the stuff was beautiful. And I really remembered being in a toy store looking at Barbies, feeling like sort of deep yearning that went even beyond like getting the doll. There was something in it that I was, that's why that's why she's compelling. And then I think at the same time, just always I was always aware of the arguments against Barbie. There was never a time that I wasn't aware of, this isn't this is not the correct role model, and is it a good body image? So I think that, well, I think in a way, because Barbie is such a, like you say, a literal piece of plastic. Um, I think in some way that the only way we could come at it was through a personal lens, and also
Yeah.
kind of like how the culture has operated personally within us. And even though Noah didn't desire Barbies, he certainly knew what
And
they were.
I knew what that was with other toys. I mean, that's sort of the relationship between children and
So does that mean that Noah was more in charge of the Ken point of view?
No, I feel like the way we work is, there's just, I think at the very beginning of this one, that I initially like wrote some strange scenes that about between a Barbie and a woman who was dying.
Well, Greta signed me up for it without telling me. So I was, and I think in her way just uh, assumed it would all sort of work itself out. And I tried to get out of it. And but when Greta presented me with these pages that she had been working on, I saw what she saw in it, because they were, I mean, it was a tone that's not really so much, the tone of the pages was quite dark in a way, because it was Barbie coming out of a dream house, and a woman who was dying and from the real world was in her backyard, and Barbie was trying to understand what death was in this conversation. And I felt like, well, I can't really imagine this will make it in the movie, but this should be what the movie is about in some way.
Yeah,
and
what
I
a
felt
great
really
inspiration. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was really Greta's sort of whatever her sort of instinct was, that I once I what really from that point forward, and we started talking, I loved it. It all of the things that you so generously kind of called out in your introduction were things that were inherent in the material. So the more we even just told the story, the more opportunity we had to introduce all of these bigger subjects, both philosophical and religious, but also sociological and political as well. Those things were all just there. So we didn't have to say, oh, we want to make this point or not make this point. It was there at every turn in the story.
It felt very embedded in it. And I think too, because we also knew we were writing for Margot Robbie and that she was going to be Barbie, this sort of stereotypical Barbie. I mean, the way she describes, I'm the Barbie you think of when somebody says, think of a Barbie, that's me. I think that was also, even structurally, I have a memory of you saying to me, but I don't know if you remember this, of like, we need to, instead of, I mean, everybody's seen different versions of like movies going between like our world and a different world. And Noah, I think we're like early, like it needs to start in Oz. We're not going from Kansas to Oz. We'll start in Oz and then
yeah, good
Kansas.
idea. Yeah.
And that was sort of, I mean, just, I think sometimes in early writing, that's what's nice about having a writing partner, is because when
I
you're
love a writing
your
partner.
own
Yeah.
head, you can get a little confused about what it is. And it's so helpful to have somebody outside of you say like, okay, great. Now let's like do this. And then I feel that the way we work is we just keep going back and forth, because then Noah will write something and he'll be like, I don't know. And I'm like, no, I see where it goes. And that's the nice thing about it's harder to do it your own. I think it is.
I think that whatever, the connection that you have with each other is so unique and special and honed and understood by each other, that as someone watching the film, you get the benefit of your collaborative, I would say, like escalating wit and invention that you just can't imagine. There's so many great lines in this too that I've sort of underlined here and there. But or even, Ken's t-shirt with "I'm Knuff." Just so many incredible inventions that made me really jealous. I just felt like, oh my God, I want to do something that's so funny and beloved, and I mean, it's kind of a really curious departure for you both in a way, to be in a world like this.
What you're saying though also is, I think it was very much the process was, because it's about dolls and it's about play, and the concept is essentially that everything that's going on there they're being played with, that the play, we're doing it together, was play, and that worked.
And that's such a great way of thinking about it, because play is, I think, the actual heart of creativity. You know, like what comes out of play, and dolls are play, and you know, here you were in a gorgeous Barbie sandpit that you just stretched out forever onto Venice Beach and back again.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was as if we were playing with dolls in a way.
I do feel it's funny. It is a departure, I think, but in a way, I mean, I'm sure you feel this because
Yeah.
every movie you embark on is its own
Yeah.
universe. And I don't think, or I didn't, I mean, both of us have worked within what I guess could be sort of contained as realism, I suppose. But I've never felt committed to that as like an aesthetic project. It just has been the things project by project that we've done. But even we've talked about sort of more heightened things, more like broadly comedic writing, things that were more whole cloth invented. That's like and again, I guess it just returns to childhood. It's like a kind of writing I know you remember doing young as like a kid, and I also remember doing that kind of like fantasy or is sort of like or jokes like really really
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
something like that. And I think in a way it's like you as you make movies you become people are like, well, you make this kind of movie, and in a way you're like, well, but that's only because those are all the movies I've made. That doesn't mean that that's the only kind of movie I'll ever make. It's just yeah.
But this seems like somehow uniquely liberating.
It was.
It was. And
Yeah.
it gave us permission to do things that I think if we weren't, rather than restrictive, which you could, maybe you might sort of assume, oh, if you're going to do a big studio IP movie, that there would be restrictions. It actually was the opposite. It gave us permission to do things that we wouldn't have, I certainly wouldn't have done if I was originating, the idea, or just writing whatever my next movie was. It was, which made it, and as Greta said, I think it also did bring us back to not just the play of childhood, but the certain kind of movie we loved as kids too, that
Yeah.
at this point neither of us had made as adults.
Yeah. I was just going to, maybe it's the right moment, but I just wanted to talk about the end of the film. I made this note here that says the film is onto all the contradictions of the Barbie phenomenon, and it's also delighting in it. It's quite the twisting road to bring Barbie to wanting ordinariness and consciousness, being the one that imagines also complexity perfectly expressed as Barbie leaving Barbie land for an appointment with her gynecologist. I couldn't believe how perfect that was for, Barbie's desire for complexity.
Yeah. It's all pretty complex.
How did that come about? How did that idea come through? Because it must have been hard to know how to end it.
Well, we always knew there was just a point in the writing process. I think we knew we wanted Barbie to end as a human, that had to be the ending of it.
Is it like a Pinocchio idea or?
Yeah, it had a Pinocchio. It had there was Wizard of Oz in terms of leaving, that
yeah.
she was always more human than she realized.
But there was also something in it in terms of like a kind of spiritual journey in terms of the beginning, that she's in a place, with no death and no aging and no sadness. And then she realizes that's not what life is. And
just the Buddha story,
which is both, yeah, that's that's in Genesis, and it's also the Siddhartha. It's a story of coming into adult consciousness in a way. And I think you fight it and then you have to accept it. But so we all that was always clear that it was like that very old story of shedding an idea of Eden or
perfection. Yeah.
perfection. Yeah. And and then embracing what is. And I think at the end, we didn't have the actual last line for a while, but we had different iterations of her being in an ordinary life. And I think once we hit on it, though, we were so sure that that was it felt like, I don't know, you don't get that many gifts as a writer that are just like, that's a great
These guys
ending.
seem to have got a lot of them, yeah.
But like I remember when we were talking about it, you know, and obviously there was nervousness of ending the movie that way because for every reason you can think of. But I remember at one point someone had suggested, couldn't she be going and now she's running Mattel? And I was like, no, because that's extraordinary. The point is she's doing something that everybody does, but she's doing it with such joy, you know? And also I was thinking about, I mean, in particular, I was thinking about, you know, teen girls and their bodies and how embarrassed they are and how embarrassed I was and how embarrassing the whole thing seemed. And even saying the word gynecologist felt like,
or vagina.
or vagina, it felt
or I've got a hole in me, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought like, well, if Barbie is gonna go to her gynecologist and feel great about it, well, that might be a nice thing to give them because they're already so embarrassed as you are about yourself. And I think that that would be a very sweet thing to have her end on, and it felt like and she was just so delightful the way she said it. But it did feel like when we realized that was the ending, it was like there's no going back. That's our ending.
Well, and so much of the movie was also playing with expectations of all the various versions of both highbrow, lowbrow of that we've all seen in movies or know from, you know, different hero stories. And so we also then knew that in the setup of her getting out of the car and going, you know, the people were going to have all this sort of expectation of where she go, you know, you know, is she running Mattel? Is she, you know, is it a job? Whatever the thing is. So that was a great opportunity also just in the sort of structure of it, because that also went with so much of what we were doing throughout the movie, which was setting up, you know, like we even sort of say it in the movie, like, you know, how this goes. You know, I mean, all the rules are so arbitrary about how to get from Barbie land to the real world, and that, you know, we just sort of take the piss out of it. Because usually when we watch those movies, we don't really want to deal with the rules. We just want to know, we just want permission to go, you know, which, and in some ways the best ones like The Wizard of Oz even don't really, the rules are fantastical anyway. It's just that, you know, she just is flown there, and you know, and then she has to click her slippers to get back.
Yeah, I mean, I also loved how you made the journey between the two lands pretty, as you said, like, oh, best not to think about it. It's pretty quick and this and that.
No, and it was definitely that sort of like that expectation of like, oh, it's going to be this, and then it's
right, you know, this, but no, actually we're going to do this, or sometimes we're going to do that, but we're going to do it in a different way.
But everything that you do it with so much wit and invention and thought. I mean, I think that is the totally compelling thing for me.
I think we talked a lot about like great endings, like, and I mean, for me, I love the ending, and I know Noah does too. The ending of Working Girl, when Melanie Griffith comes in and she thinks she's the secretary, and then they're like, no, I'm your secretary. And then she has this moment, and then she says, don't get coffee unless you're getting it for yourself. Like, you know, she had this sweet thing, and it's such a great ending because it's the character, you know, and it's her, and you love her and you're so happy, you know.
Well, and then he also does the thing where you see her in the window and then the camera pulls back and she's just one office of
so many,
which is also sort of a surprising, because you get the satisfaction of her getting her job, but it is a kind of starting job, and you know, and you see many different people. It's a very quite moving too.
So I feel like we were thinking about those kinds of endings about something that kind of like puts a little kind of like it's a close of the journey, but it's the beginning of the next journey.
Well, it's like Frances Ha has that too,
Yeah.
is essentially like the big win is that she
Accepts the things that were always there for her.
yeah, and that she's not going to have the big dream, you know.
So
And
is it kind of, I mean, in your own lives, you know, I imagine actually it pretty much reflects what is said at the end, that Barbie, you know, wants to be the person that does the writing, that comes up with the ideas, and that there, you know, there is a joy. And what more is there than being an ordinary person?
No. Yeah, that's
I mean,
right.
it's, you're being fated at the moment, and it's probably been going on all year. I'm sure it's very exhausting. It's the sort of exhaustion one can cope with, probably.
No, but
But
it is.
yeah,
No, it is. I mean, also, as I mean, this has been so lovely, of course. But the truth is, I think back to when we were writing it, you know, we were writing it in the midst of lockdown, and it was the way we kept each other laughing and engaged, and it was like this sort of thing we could escape into. And in some ways, for me, like that pleasure of us writing was, you know, such a high point for me. And then the making of it felt like the world that we'd built together. Then we were bringing in all these other people, and it's that pleasure is so sincere that then it, nothing else can sort of top it. And of course, it's wonderful when people go and feel that, but it really is in the doing that
yeah,
is has the most pleasure, I think.
yeah. Um, so are you guys? I mean, we haven't even really talked about the directing, Greta, which is
Oh,
just pitch perfect. I mean, I always think directing is largely about tone and holding it and managing it, and you know, having imagined in your own mind everything that could be. I mean, in this world you would need to, because it's not going to turn up. You have to have thought about it, and I'm sure everyone's contributing, but really the work you did is just pitch perfect. It's you know, hats off, really proud of you, amazing.
thank you.
Yeah,
I have to say, it was like a everything about the tone and about the world that we were building was clear to me. But one thing about directing that I'm always surprised by, but I shouldn't be surprised by, is nobody else is in your head. People don't know what it is you mean at all. Like you know, you have to, because to me it was perfectly clear the way this was going to be like on sound stages and how it was going to work. And no one else knew that. And I think it was sort of like every step of the way hitting on the right exact constructed world. I mean, I think one thing about this movie, which is untrue of anything else I've done, it was the it was the most control I've had over, I mean, not all the time, but anything you see in the frame in Barbie Land or in Mattel, I have control over everything in the frame, and it differently than when you're shooting in the world. You know, the light changes in some way you couldn't have predicted, or um uh you know, you'll find a location that is perfect in a certain way. These were all totally constructed. So
you adapt to the location in a way that
and
yes,
and who did you bounce off mostly with with your directing? Was it with still with Noah, or was it also with your designer or DOP? I mean, I
I
always find there's somebody that I really, you know, is helping me extend the vision, or, you know.
I had a lot of pre-production time, like soft pre-production with my production designer, Sarah Greenwood. So she and I spent hours and hours on Zoom together, so that by the time we were actually in real pre-production, she had a very clear sense of what it was that we were trying to achieve. And then I felt like I felt like everything went back through Noah because we invented it together. So there was no way, like, I don't, I think there are very few things that I didn't you know, that we didn't check back in on and make sure that it was the same imaginary thing. But I think Rodrigo too, who was my cinematographer, he was a big part of that because I mean, at the end of the day, this doesn't sound so obvious, but I think no matter what the scale of a movie is, you do there you at some point you're like, well, I'm gonna put actors in this space, and then I'm gonna decide where to put the camera. Like it's not
Yeah.
as crazy as it is, it's gonna be some version of that. And I think that that's and
Yeah.
I guess I started being in terms of just being very close with Rodrigo because in a way it helped me ground it in now how are we capturing it. I mean, I think I obviously I've written with Noah and I've seen him work a lot, and I think for me extensively shot listing is something that I've seen him do, and I find it to be very helpful because it forces you to just start saying, even if you don't use it,
Yeah.
like here's what the shots are. And then another thing that we would do is he and I would either on the weekends or the night before, like go over the shots. So just at dinner, I just have like, here, what are we shooting tomorrow? These are the shots we think we're going to do. Here are the storyboards we think we have. And we just talk it out. Like here,
this is the time we have for
this is the time, this is like, and we'd say like, and we just sort of like reconnect about what the intention of the scene was, and it was like, okay, the scene's this, and it's luckily it's fun for Noah. He enjoys
So that's really great. Do you actually do your own drawings for the storyboards, or do you work with a storyboard artist, or how does that happen?
this one I worked with a storyboard artist, but I find and it was really helpful. Although learning how to use storyboards is it's its own thing because storyboards are so helpful and they're also not movies. So you have to find a way to interpret them. But then we use a storyboard artist, and then also Rodrigo said this to me, and it's true. He said you should start just drawing your own because it'll make you think that way.
Mm.
And it was
I mean,
actually really
yeah, I mean, I do my own drawing because I'm like from art school, so I can draw somewhat, not that well though. But what I love about it, it's not that the drawings are amazing or anything like that, but actually it's just time imagining the scene.
yeah.
So right. That you imagine it from so many different angles that nothing kind of surprises you. You do feel like you own the scene in some way, and that you're not going to get surprised when something happens. And you can see better situation, when the cast come on, they do amazing things or whatever, and you can easily pivot because you're not confused. You know what you've thought, and this is better.
I think it also forces you. Yeah. It forces my brain to think inside a rectangle, which I think because I came from theater or dance, I tend to see 360, and actually at the end of the day you're going to be putting whatever it is that you see into this rectangle, and it forces me to think like, okay, now what is it, what am I doing within this box?
Guys, I could really talk. I'm so frustrated and so excited to have had the chance to speak to you at all and express my love of your film and your work together and your work to Greta. It's just fucking awesome. But I've been getting the time rundown, and I've been told it's enough, I'm afraid.
Thank you so much. It's
really,
so good to talk to you.
I'm such a admirer always.
I am such fans of both of you, and I hope you keep having fun. And I'm really proud of you, Greta.